Yep.
Okay.
Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and call to order at 7:05 on Tuesday, May 18th. And we will start with the approval of the minutes for May 5th meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
And a second. Are there, is there any discussion? Okay, all of those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
All of those opposed? And are there any abstentions? Okay, so that looked unanimous and for the approval of the minutes. And our next agenda item is to appoint a clerk to take minutes. How'd the move go, Jess? Not yet.
Yeah, I haven't moved yet, but
Oh.
I will be before the next meeting.
Wonderful. Hey, Thon.
Hi, Thon. We've already called to order and approved the minutes from May 5th. And now we need to appoint a clerk to take the minutes since Jess will not be with us after tonight's meeting.
And correct me if I'm wrong, so Maya and I as chair and vice chair are not able to fill that role, but any other member is able to. And meetings are recorded, so it doesn't need to be like a feverish note taking, but more so about just the major points of the meeting.
So since you don't have the full task force this evening, you could table it if you want to wait. If there aren't any volunteers for this evening, that would be okay. And then as vice chair, Dan, you could just record again the basic votes, the call to order, the adjournment, and any motion seconds, as you said, and then use the recording as the context. So if there's no one that's eager to do it now, I recommend that you probably table it until you have a full meeting.
Now, do we have to take a vote on tabling?
You have to make a motion and
okay,
then
the same. Okay. So do we have a motion to table the appointment of the clerk until we have probably the rest of the task force together to appoint?
I'll make that motion.
Perfect.
I'll second it.
And we have a second. Any discussion with that? All of those in favor of tabling the appointment of the clerk till next meeting? All of those opposed? Any opposed or any abstentions? Also unanimous.
And I'm happy to do the notes for this meeting for sure.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So our next agenda item, graduation day, dress policy review and discussion prior to school committee review and possible approval. So did everybody have a chance to take a look at that dress code for graduation ceremony?
If it would be helpful, I can share my screen and bring those up.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So we did have, which one is first on the agenda? Is it the policy or the definitions?
It is the graduation dress policy.
Perfect. So yep. This was crafted by the practices work group, taking this practice and really forming it into a more formal policy. During the process, we did find that there was a policy from 1999 for dress code for graduation. So the group took that and kind of, did I share my screen? I did, right? Okay. Just realizing it.
Yep. Nope.
Pressing the button. So this has the edits in red and everything taken out in the cross out. But if it's easier, I did paste a clean version right here if that's easier. But I'm happy to read it through real quick in case I'm sure it's not. It may be, depending on the device you're on, maybe kind of small and difficult to read. So it says that all seniors must wear appropriate attire to participate in the graduation ceremony. Appropriate attire will include the following. And we did have some edits on here, so which I'm realizing are not reflected on this one. So appropriate attire will include the following: slacks, dress, skirt, blouse, shirt with collar, shoes, no tank tops, halter tops, shorts or bathing suits will be allowed. No bare feet, sneaker, athletic shoes unless medically necessary, or boots will be allowed. There's one suggested edit in this paragraph. So that suggestion was to keep no bare feet, but to cross off this whole section, basically showing no bare feet allowed, but not dictating what type of shoe, as it didn't feel necessary at all. So we can discuss that. But let me just cross that out so we don't forget. The district supports the diversity of its student body and welcomes traditional cultural regalia and recognized objects of cultural and/or religious significance. This includes clothing, accessories, and adornment. An example of that would be Indigenous beadwork. The district supports the wearing of honor cords, stoles, and pins at graduation ceremony by a student who has earned these privileges through achieving academic honors or athletic distinction, military service, induction into recognized honor societies, a member of a service organization, or in recognition of a student's cultural identity and/or heritage. Class advisors and/or administrators will only allow properly attired students to participate in the graduation ceremony. Students without proper attire will be turned away. Diplomas will be removed from those being distributed at the ceremony and will be available for pickup at the main office in the high school the next working day after graduation. So, I think you're on mute, Maya.
So you said that another suggestion was to remove, where was it? The no bare, where was it supposed to stop? No top.
Sorry.
Right after bathing suits will be allowed, and no bare feet, and then the sneakers, all of that was going to be removed.
Mm-hmm. That was a
suggestion.
And Lisa has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
When you're done, I'm just waiting.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to make sure I knew where it was stopped, because on the clear one you had it crossed out. Then you switch. I can't. My eyes don't move that.
Sorry.
Fast. Nope, that's okay. You can go ahead, Lisa. I just wanted to make sure I understood what the removal was.
So great work on this piece. I'm sure it was very satisfying to work on something so immediate and something that could be so impactful for students right in the immediate future. I did get called into a legal meeting this morning with the chair of the school committee and John Anderson. So I'm going to share with you the legal advice that we're being given around the policy. Good news first, right? So the language to make this non-gendered is wonderful, right? Applause to all of you for noting that, for leading with that. I'm so excited about this work, and so are the students, This is exactly where we need to be on this topic. And I've asked the superintendent to actually look to any other policy that we have that refers to dress code in the district to do the same. Also, small change to some, we know a huge change to most, which is from dress to attire, right? Again, really well done, wonderful vocabulary, certainly supported by me, and legally cleared, no issues, right? So wonderful. All that is great. Removing the prohibition of sneakers and athletic shoes. Mrs. Weeks is coming in. So, right, not specifying, right, or restricting students from wearing things like sneakers, boots, again, good choice, right? We're seeking to be inclusive, so all of that's great. All right, so now what I was advised to share with you is the intention of what we're trying to do in terms of cultural inclusivity versus the impact. And so the intention, right, has been recognized by the chair and the lawyer as inclusive, right? That many of these things have always been part of graduation: honor cords, stoles, pins, military honors, but not necessarily items of cultural identity or heritage have been included, right? So we're seeking to be inclusive. The concern that John has that he is going to present to the school committee is that it's too broad, and that what's going to happen, he suspects, is that it will not only be used to be inclusive of cultural identity markers and or regalia that we mean it to be, but it also could mean that someone could drape themselves in the Confederate flag and say, culturally, this is my culture, right? I'm a descendant of the uncles of the Confederacy, and that's my culture. And that he is very concerned that it'll go there pretty quickly, which is not the impact that we're seeking.
Sure.
So we had a very long discussion about this. It's not something that, those of you who know me, that I went, oh, okay, John, right? There was certainly some great conversation back and forth. We talked about religious attire. And again, here trying to specifically include the vocabulary around religion. Let me move this. I believe it's in C, right? So cultural significance. So we had the conversation around, how, those people that identify as atheists could feel that that is exclusive. Also, there are some religions, so let's say one that might be focused on Satanism, that would then offend some, and that even though the intent is to be inclusive, the impact is going to be problematic, and one that he cannot advise the school committee to adopt.
Sure.
I then asked, I said, okay, so we need to really keep thinking about this, because in practice, if somebody wears a gold chain with a cross, they're not going to be stopped from wearing that. Okay, if somebody presents wearing a hijab, nobody is going to tell that student to uncover her hair. Nobody. And I wouldn't, right? I certainly wouldn't stand for that, nor would anybody. Okay, if somebody has a yarmulke, no one's going to stop that. So what is the only thing we're going to stop? Is it going to be beads? Is it going to be regalia, right? So, and how do we then be inclusive when we know that in practice, some of these things are already allowed and have been allowed? Military honors, right? Allowed. So he went on further to say that in terms of policy, the difference is that under the First Amendment, we can't prohibit somebody from wearing something that has clear religious significance, right? We can't prohibit that. However, policy-wise, we also cannot endorse or encourage that. And so that's how that was the best explanation after, a good 30-minute thoughtful conversation as to how we get to the place where we are encouraging, including those cultures and identities who have to this point been excluded because they haven't been the mainstream, and get it passed, but also make sure that the impact is that, right, we do not want, I do not want, I'll be very clear on record, I do not want students coming to graduation with a Confederate flag draped across their shoulders. or that print on a stole. So he recommended that this language not be included, and that rather we maintain that if the item or adornment to that individual has deep religious or spiritual connection, then it is on those grounds that that student can then include it, whether it's a cord, or it's a stole, or it's a pin. And that we don't explicitly take the approach of saying all things are welcome, right? All religious artifacts, all cultural significance is welcome. And that's his reasoning. Now let's talk about it. Let's think about it, right? We definitely need to have conversations around it. It's certainly not a binary issue, right? There's a whole bunch of things in between here. The last point that he and the school committee chair made was to say that the idea about the cap and gown is to neutralize and unify everybody, to bring everyone together as one unified Charahoe student body. And that is the point of the cap and gown, is to cover up all other things and move forward as one class in unison with the focus on the student and not on anything else. The school committee definitely is likely not going to accept anything that has to do with like major decorations on the cap. I'm pretty sure that is going to stay the way it is. Where we may have some ability to influence the school committee, and John will listen to it openly as he can, is around things like cords, stoles, things that are draped around draped around the students' collars, I guess. And then anything again that the individual can point to and say, in my religion, in my spirituality, this is what we wear in this moment to signify, right, this really incredible moment, the way you wear a yarmulke and you wear a hijab and you wear your cross. So that's where we are with that. So let me stop talking for a little bit and just listen.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And, I don't want to speak for, Katie, Thon, Carla, but in our, we had a several hour long conversation about, the simple changes you see on here. And there's some things that were, and, everything you see, the C and D is really the whole reason why we came to why the Anti-Racism Task Force is looking at this. And currently those things are in practice, but not written down. So that's where we spend a lot of our conversation. So that's really helpful to hear from a legal aspect. And some of those conversations regarding, Confederate flag, we had some of those conversations and tried to be intentional there while also being inclusive. My first thought goes to, the cultural significance, the adornments were kind of the first, thoughts of the group. And then really the last thing we realized that really wasn't written down anywhere was the honor cords, because there's a lot of different organizations and reasons why people receive those, but we couldn't find it written anywhere. So we took this from other places and other schools and kind of made it a little Charahoe, but certainly open, really interested to hear what other people's thoughts are there.
Yeah, if I could speak for a quick second. Yeah, I agree that obviously we don't really have the expertise to look at it from a legal standpoint. And our intention is obviously to be inclusive, like you said, and not to have situations where it could be problematic or hurtful with people, because obviously this is a celebration. And like you said, it's a chance for everyone to kind of, as a cohort, celebrate together. I will say that I'm just going to voice my interpretation. For me, the interpretation of, well, and I have a quick question, Lisa. Are the gowns still two different colors? Or are they all green now?
I have sat on that dais for 6 years, Dawn, and I have no idea. And I have looked at them for 6 years. Joe, do you know?
They're green and white.
And how do we designate the colors?
So that's it. When I was graduated, it was females white, males green.
That's
So already there's a divide there. But I think a cap and gown, and you could say it so we're all unified and graduating together as one cohort, like no individuality, which we all obviously bring individuality. But to me, that cap and gown, which I mean, I've wore cap and gowns. Obviously, when I have worn them, they have also been reflective of who I am and my culture and who I am as a citizen or member of the Nahahagantzik people. But I think that is kind of the regalia of our current. That's when I see that, I think that is a white culture or European culture or wherever you see that all over, and that is not like actual. That is that. So that is the norm, the base, and I think as we see in a lot of society, these are the base and the norm. And when it's kind of challenged or pushed, like, well, that's not really how we dress to celebrate these kind of occasions, then. But with that being said, I do understand that, and I obviously we want to change that in a way that this can still happen, and I kind of can see with. I mean, I don't know. I'm not bound to or in my life bound to. I get kind of the sentiment behind a lot of these things. I just also feel like sometimes change is a little difficult and scary. And but I think the main thing is with, you said the caps, and maybe it's not written, but that our people and indigenous people all over, we adorn us caps with eagle feathers, things like that. These are things that other people can't even access or get because it's illegal for them to own. But because of our spiritual and religious beliefs, the federal government gives us access that we can obtain and hold these things. And so that's the only thing I'm kind of concerned about, because there is such significance to that. And you spoke on like a chain with a cross or someone, hijab, those kind of things. And I just read an article recently where a native student had an eagle feather that a parent had given, that the parent had worn and given for graduation, and someone took it from them right off their head, like without asking. And that just was horrific to me, and I couldn't believe it. And so obviously I just don't want anyone to kind of face that. So I want to know, how do we word this in a way that gives that allowance? I think there has to be something, because I don't want it to, because you could have these intentions individually, but someone gets something in their head of, oh, nothing's supposed to be there, and just kind of doesn't have that cultural sensitivity and goes and touch, like, we don't let other people just touch our feathers like that. That's like, I think, so I'm wondering if he gave advice how we can kind of write that in there.
I won't speak for the advice. So John's advice was what he told, or what I've shared, right? Is that his responsibility is to protect the district. And he has access to lots of case law and issues that have happened in other districts when well-intended, culturally inclusive groups come along, put in language like this, and the next thing they know that what they didn't think was going to happen. And we know that there are people within this community that could very well make that the case as well, right? And now we have things that are symbols of hate and discrimination being claimed to be cultural, right? So that's as much as I can. I don't want to speak or expand on what John, right, may or may not say, but here's what I would like to add to this, Dawn. One is as an anti-racism task force, I encourage you to continue to work on this policy this evening and to present it, because let the school committee deliberate it, right? You have some context, right? John was thoughtful enough to read this in advance, pull me in, and make sure that you understood in advance some concerns and pushback that may come from him, the superintendent, and the school committee. That doesn't mean that you as a task force don't decide to go forward anyway, right? Sometimes in this work, we go through and maybe they vote against it. But I have experience with this, and there have been moments, and Donna and I think you both were on the call the day that I was asked, I don't want to deviate from our agenda, but there are times where you just have to make people vote. And so I encourage you to take the legal advice as much as you can without disrupting the integrity of what you're trying to do, and then bring it forward. Bring it to the school committee, let them deliberate it, because ultimately they have to approve it or not, right? So I think that is the right way for a task force to operate. Now, Dawn, what you said is absolutely essential, right? And would be presented to the school committee and perhaps written into this document, which is the inclusion of eagle feathers is, to the best Western understanding possible, right? From a Western point of view, because we can only understand so much if it's not our lived experience. The best analogous example to the eagle feathers is the hijab, the yarmulke, the cross, and therefore is an item protected under the First Amendment, and therefore shall be included. And so if we look at, for example, let's see, we're looking at D, which you said was borrowed from another district. So that's it's language that's already in Rhode Island. And we somehow included, or actually, I'm sorry, let me keep thinking of this. So C, we somehow got the beadwork or the eagle feathers noted as part of the understanding of the school committee, right? Because we definitely don't want anything touched, and nor should anyone be touching a student ever touching somebody else. The other issue is the green and white. I mean, such a good point. We all, I don't know what you, that one went over me as we're doing this non-gendered policy. Completely lost on me that, yeah, we're already gendering students. So, all right, so if you're a non-binary, then what color are you wearing? Light green? Swirly green? So maybe that's a 2022 practice, but I'll stop now. But those are my suggestions. Continue on and let the school committee deliberate it.
I saw Jess, then Katie, and Donis and Joe with their hands raised. So go ahead, Jess.
So I just, I thought Fawn made all of the good points, particularly around, the standard, right? The standard is based on whatever European regalia that somebody wanted to institute. And that's in and of itself is non-inclusive. And so I thought that was a great point among all of the others that Fawn made. But, for me to take this interpretation and sort of cut to the lowest common denominator of people jumping to have some type of attire that reflects some type of hateful or oppressive symbolism, to me seems like if we don't move forward being inclusive because we're worried about that, then we're maintaining the non-inclusive policy, which to me is problematic. But I also feel like there should be a way to describe certain types of attire like that where, it causes harm. The feather and the beading that the indigenous tribal members might wear at graduation, I mean, you'd have to have some serious issues if that was offensive to you. Whereas we can all agree that the Confederate flag, regardless of one's personal attachment to it, is a symbol that people use in a hateful way and an oppressive way. And I feel like there's a huge difference there that needs to be called out. Now, when you start to get into the religion thing, I can't say that for me it's so cut and dry because I'm agnostic basically. And so I feel like if somebody's a Satanist and somebody's a Christian, well, power to them both. But I feel like in terms of like, you know, things that are actually culturally significant to somebody, that can't be equated to somebody draping a Confederate flag or a swastika over themselves. And I feel like we have to be more nuanced than that in the 21st century. So that's the end of my 2 cents.
Katie, I saw your hand next, and Donis, you're after Katie.
Thank you. I was going to make the point that I'm not particularly well versed in the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, but I would say as well, in addition to the First Amendment, that many of these things would be protected there. I don't know if it would be considered a friendly amendment to remove in letter C, cultural, and include instead religious and spiritual significance, because I think that spiritual terminology might be more encompassing and less misinterpretive, if that is a word. But my concern, examples of eagle feathers do make clear sense to me, but I know that the community, the indigenous community locally, has particularly shared concerns about being able to wear items that are beaded and have those be accepted. So I don't know if those could be examples that would be all encompassing if you were to talk about religious and spiritual significance. But I will read up on the Religious Freedom Act to ensure that I can bring that in if it is helpful at school committee. Thank you for your time.
And Donis, and then Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo some things that have already been said. I think I'm kind of willing to consider Katie's changes to just include religious alone, because the usage of eagle feathers, red-tailed hawk feathers, wampum, and then what and we can kind of have more discussion about this. It's not the beads themselves that are sacred, it's the designs. So if we are, you know, we want to talk about the usage of beadwork, it's the actual, literally the sacred geometry that's within the designs of the beads themselves that are part of the religion. So I would advocate for, you know, if it's helpful to kind of narrow this down outside of the realm of culture and into the realm of religion. Those all are things that are tied to some of the precedents in federal Indian policy that already exist, as has already been referred to by Katie and Thon, and the possession of eagle feathers is illegal for non-native people who are not enrolled in federally acknowledged tribes. So I think, you know, there is some kind of precedent that could back up us kind of keeping it in the realm of religious freedom for Native people.
Joe?
Yes, I would just like to take it one step further. Lisa said that the district's attorney said that the language was too broad. So why don't we just eliminate section C and put in the stipulation of the feathers and the beads and make it much more specific in section D. And also to the other issue of the green and white, I think we also have to remember that, you know, tradition is very important in graduation. So I think it would be very difficult to just eliminate one color because, you know, district charter host colors are green and white. Would it be appropriate to give students a choice, male or female, to wear green or white? I mean, that's one way to handle that issue. Just your thoughts.
I like that suggestion, Joe. Give them a choice, whatever they identify with, or whichever color that they choose. They don't have to identify. It doesn't have to be a distinction. I wish I could have wore a green one to my graduation. I also have, I guess it's a question as far as what Katie said regarding I know what my culture would consider spiritual or religious. I think that if we were to use just that term, I think just like Jess had mentioned, or Lisa had mentioned, that the legal team said that we would still run into the same issue because somebody else could say that what they find spiritual, even though it may be offensive to another person, but maybe within their practice of religion, something that they find it relates to their spirituality. So I don't know how this is how exact we can make this, and I am all for trying to narrow it down or try to include as much as we possibly can, and then give it to the school committee and let them vote. Oh, Dan, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, I had two things I was thinking of. One is something that the practices work group put in and took out and put in and took out was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was in D, or it could have been a separate letter, but it originally had written in there something along the lines of, you know, this, you know, any of these things here in D would have to be submitted to an example of them shown to administration 2 weeks, month, I don't know what it was. The reason for taking that out was the whole reason for putting this down in writing is to take the kind of that gray area out. So, you know, that was one thing that just kind of came to my mind. And then the other piece is currently nowhere in current policy does it say a student has to wear a cap and gown. That again it is a practice. That's not even in this policy. So I'm wondering if while we are updating this 1999 dress code policy, nowhere in here, you know, it is a practice that the school has, you know, male wear green, you know, things like that. So just thoughts of while we are in this process, you know, is there, you know, do we expect that, or do we think that that should be added in here, that, you know, these things here in the sub bullet under B are expected to be under a cap and gown. So those are just something that kind of popped up for me.
I see Katie, then Lisa.
Sorry. So I believe the original policy did, the very first line said all seniors must wear appropriate, as you see in the corrected version, under their gowns. But we did remove that section. So if this were adopted, I suppose as it currently stands, it would imply that that is optional, which I'm assuming would not be approved.
Lisa?
So what I'm kind of listening to the best of everything you're saying. So if your new A, right, to lead this begins with all graduates, even the word seniors, if we just change it to graduates, we have students with special needs, students that may be second, third, fourth year seniors, children with special needs, students can be in school till they're 21. So if we change it to graduates, and A leads with all graduates will, right, adorn or wear a cap and gown. Students, right, will select, their preference of green or white. So, right, kind of umbrellas start there. Everyone's wearing cap and gown when you graduate, whenever that is, inclusive, and the options are green or white. Great, right? Then, right, all of the everything you've done to disengender, wonderful, right? We all agree that definitely needs to move forward. An idea could be, right, because several of you made the point, right, that the norm is Western culture and the change is inclusive. I'm wondering, in terms of policy development, and this is where I have some experience, less words are actually more protective. If we stripped this back, just an idea, and rather than try to include everything, we made a more simple statement that noted the law that Katie referred to. And I would like to know more about that, Katie. But you said in addition to the First Amendment, that there is, right, a federal law that specifically protects, right, something to this point that, right, that are for our federally recognized tribes. If is there a way for us to simply add to that, in addition to the First Amendment, this Charahoe School Committee recognizes the boop, boop, up, up, the act. And I wish Katie would come back on and say what it is, because I didn't write it down. I was thinking, as soon as she was saying it, I started thinking, oh, okay, we got to get those words in there. Because then what that does is it takes a lot of the interpretation out and allows our lawyer to say, no, point to this law. Nope, no interpretation. We're saying the First Amendment and this law. This is federal law, and Charahoe recognizes and elevates this federal law. That may be a way to go that gets exactly what you want done, allows our lawyer and our school committee to be inclusive, but also doing it through a framework that is based in legislation and race. There may be some theories to talk about that, but we won't get into it.
It's the American Indian Religious Freedom Act.
So could that be, and you know what, you can always take alternatives to the school committee, right? Say, okay, for C and D, here's Amendment 1. This is our justification for this. If, here's another version of that based on some legal advice, here's our justification for that. It's okay to present them with choices. That's part of your work.
While I love that idea, and I think that is sad that it's needed, but it is a good way for the Indigenous graduates to be able to incorporate our spirituality but I have to wonder, and I don't know what other groups may be left out. While I'm thankful, but I graduated a long time ago and I have a long way to go before this one graduates. But I have family that's going to be graduating this year. I think that includes, it includes that group, but we have others that I wonder how we're going to reword in order for them to be able to practice whatever they practice for ceremonies such as a graduation.
Well,
and
I could just jump in.
Yep.
But those are already, you're right, you all actually made the point. Those are already protected under other federal laws.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. The First Amendment is going to absolutely protect anyone's religious freedom. That's actually how John started, right? And then if you think about people with disabilities, you've got the Americans with Disabilities Act, you've got Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, right? Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act that provides the right to captioning, inclusive material. So actually, Maya, right? Like so many groups, their advocacy over the years since around the 1990s has prevailed, right?
So why wouldn't ours be covered under the First Amendment as well? If it's a free religious freedom, I mean, which not if it is, we know it is. Why, or is it specifically noted that ours is a little different?
No, so it is covered legally, but everyone's point this evening is that in practice, right, due to an oppressive culture and a colonized version, right, that, you know, Thon's example of someone actually having a feather taken away from them.
Well, that was my son. Yeah.
That person didn't see that as religious, right? And so the practice and the culture has not recognized it, even though, yes, all of these things are federally protected. So then makes sense that if at some point, some advocacy group went and said, we need something specific that calls out the safety of this group and inclusion, the same way that people with disabilities managed to do that with the ADA. They said, okay, no. We want it written for us. There's right. They say nothing for us without us. Nothing for us without us. And they were able to put it in there. So anyway, I'll stop. I really think you're onto something by getting Charahoe to recognize in print, hey, everybody, this law exists too. And we in Charahoe support and are going to elevate this law as well. And so be aware, therefore don't touch.
Right. Yeah. Yes, please. I saw Carla, Miss Etta, and then Thon.
Yeah, you kind of touched on my point because I was thinking of other cultures within Charahoe that aren't necessarily native, and they might not, I don't think they would necessarily fall underneath that because, you know, if you're African and, you know, a head wrap, or if you're Scottish and you're a male and want to wear a kilt, that's not necessarily the same, which I thought that's why we pointed out all these differences. But yeah.
Miss Etta, and then Thon.
So I'm just coming at it from a totally different viewpoint. I totally agree with the conversation and this great attempt at this policy. Could I just suggest that maybe it open with a rationale for why this ceremony is so important, and that unified language that you use, Lisa, about, you know, everybody moving together, and that is why this is so significant, that they appear as a group, but we need to respect the individuality at the same time. Like, you can't have both without recognizing that. Does that make sense? Just even a short statement about what is the purpose of this dress code for graduation ceremony. We spend all this time talking about it. It must be important. There must be a reason for it.
Did anybody want to have a discussion about that? Or Thorn, you were up next.
Well, I cannot see any harm in that. Something that really kind of puts in place. Though, I mean, I think everyone that is common, everyone kind of knows why, has a feeling of why that graduation is, and though we're meant to be together, everybody's path, as you kind of said, there's so many paths to get there, and none of them are identical. And absolutely, once you leave there, none of the paths are going to be identical as well. And currently, as we say, we're repping green and white, which I, being who I am, represent the balance of different colors and their significance and meaning. I mean, we try to see balance in many things. I do want to say, when we were writing this, absolutely, like Maya said, the goal was to, obviously, without the guise of people trying to pawn off hatefulness as a culture, that we were trying to be inclusive of the beauty of all the arrays and cultures that are in our community, because that makes us that much more beautiful. And I mean, it's more empowering for our community when people are able to, be able to be who they are, like, and show that. I don't know why in the world we'd want to hide any of that. But that being said, I don't know. I looked at that. I kind of just glanced over, because no, I'm not a lawyer either, but the Religious Act, Freedoms Act. And I think what you were saying, Lisa, is very true. I think why we could run into problems in practice is based on kind of why our committee was formed. It's like the lack of understanding, one. And when it comes to Indigenous people, I'd like to say not only a lack of understanding, but a misunderstanding or a lot of false beliefs about Native people are a thing of the past, and we're playing dress up. And so
I think you froze up, Thon. You did.
What a cliffhanger.
was Native, and they don't understand the difference of being part of a tribal community. And so there's a lot to unpack with that. But I just want to say again, I feel that we truly need to write this in a way that can include everybody. But I think at the heart of it, what the lawyer's saying and what Lisa's saying is we got to make this what it is. Because for Indigenous people, it has a deep cultural significance. So we need that deep cultural significance. And that's going to, and when it comes to Indigenous people, we kind of got to put Indigenous people too, because it's not identified. Like, I don't think the mainstream culture understands our deep, significant culture. And Donis brought up, right, Sakoha Kawampum, and what that means. When settlers came here, they thought this was money. They thought they saw this exchange happening. They saw it, and they're like, oh, we can use that as currency. That's money. And that's not what it means to us. I mean, as a matter of fact, Roger Williams talks about, like, you couldn't pay an Indigenous person any amount of money for land. That's not what we do. You can't own that. And he said, I never had to pay anything. It was a gift of friendship. And but even that is a different, I'm going off tangent because that's about uses versus ownership and many things. And he spoke, our way is to kind of give tribute, and he spoke about exchanging gifts and all those things. But I think where we got to just go with it is more simplistic, and it has to be the cultural significance. And I think we really need to identify like what that means to our local indigenous community, like the people that are here, why these things are so important. And then Donna's talked about, like, it's not necessarily beadwork, because what beads, but when you talk about things like Sakoha, Wampum, and things like that, these white and purple beads from the cohort shell that, as you can imagine, take forever to, if you ever try to make one from a cohort shell. See how much man hours it.
You're freezing up again, Fawn. I'll give it a second, see if he comes back. So
Community, and
you froze up again, Fawn. Sorry.
Am I better now?
Yes.
But these things are this time, this energy, these things are to build up our community and empower our community. And as the, people are beating, they're giving prayers and protection, and there's just so much. And hopefully my screen, I am not a beater at all. Never, that's not my forte. But when my children graduated, I beaded. Like my wife wasn't a beater. I did it because I needed to for my children. That culturally is a need. And I just have a quick little, like, for my child Sharente, he has, just so people who aren't familiar can see, and this is not a good demonstration of beading. There are people who do exquisite beadwork, but I have Sakohog, our purple shells, our wampum, white shells, and they are light and darkness and life and death, and they have many meanings to us. And I have 4 here, white, and 4 there, right, for the 4 directions. In the corner, I have 7 for the next 7 generations. These beads, like a sunrise. Like, in between all these white here there's 13 for one for every square on Turtle's back. Like, there's stories within these that are the stories, and for every child it's different because they're a different child, and there's so much ingrained in that. And so I think however we do this, like, I think what the school board kind of needs to hear or see is that it is so much more impactful, and we're sending our children forth, being ashamed because these things are stripped down and taken away, and being kind of embarrassed and ashamed during these ceremonies versus being highlighted and able to walk and stand within who they really are. I know that was a lot, and I apologize.
Very good. You don't have to apologize. And Donis, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think Fawn's point of understanding the historical context also for Native peoples and their relationship with schooling in this country is really important, so that the process of graduating Indigenous students who are, now 3 generations out from the boarding school era is really important. And so when Thon is describing his own personal experience, it's actually not just his, right? It's across the country that Indigenous parents feel this way and are reflecting back on their own parents' forced removal from their communities and removal to boarding schools. And so the process of coming out of an educational system is also a community-wide celebration because the students have navigated a space that was at one time intended to erase all of these things, right? So wearing regalia or wearing these sacred geometries that Thon just gave you an example of are heightened because in this place that we live now called the United States, there were federal policies that utilized classrooms to erase our cultures and our religions. And so the context and that history is really important in having these conversations. And wouldn't it be great if the first time people living in the United States didn't just learn about boarding schools when they were, what if they learned about them more comprehensively in their schools and had a better understanding of why this context is important, and it would nuance their understanding of policy. But that's why we're here now, is to talk about that and provide that context. I can speak as someone who 3 of my 4 grandparents were forcibly removed from their homes and attended boarding schools and were forced to speak English and had the Anishinaabe Moen and the Dinepizad beaten out of them. And so it's a meaningful process to graduate our Indigenous students in the United States today. And that includes here in Rhode Island as well.
Not to mention our students are not reaching this goal at like such high rates that, I mean, that's an issue too. And a lot of that is feeling definitely displaced within this system.
Mm-hmm.
Chair, may I?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Lisa.
So when we get to present this policy at the next meeting, I will introduce you, and we will definitely lead with the significance of this, and everything that you're speaking about is to be included in the practice. What we're doing is determining how to protect the students in the moment through the policy, right? So I think everybody on the call is all yes, this is exactly what needs to happen this year, this graduation, this crossing. I'll be there, right? I will do what I can for any student I see. And you tell them, find this face if there's a problem. She's tall, she's got curly hair and giant glasses. You can't miss her. She kind of sticks out, right? So yes, but now our document, right? Our document is what we're energetic. We've got this right now, but how about 5 years from now? How about those students? What will be in place for them? Because once we get this in, it's very hard to undo, right? How is someone going to come in and say, let's take this away, right? If we get it right. So to Edda's point, while everyone was talking again, I try to take in and think and act. I have an impact statement I'll put on record for the committee to go back and look at, because it's no fun to have suggestions and then have to go back and do the work. Happens to me all the time, right? Lisa, why don't you think about this? Okay, I'll go think and write again for 2 hours. So let me find my doc. What was I using? Google Docs. Okay, so to Edda's point, draft language around framing this. The Chariho School District commencement ceremony recognizes the achievements of its graduates, and as such considers the dress code a symbol of its significance. As such, I said that twice, all graduates must wear appropriate attire to participate. So that comes right into what you have already done. Then you describe the attire, right? And you've done that, again, we keep saying like the good work of taking away the gendered attire, right? Maybe we add in that line about all graduates to participate must wear Chariho colors, green, and choose green or white. Cap, gown, Chariho colors, green or white. That I think would be a huge change and a big win for students. So then, then we have slacks, dress, skirt. Somebody mentioned a kilt. Put it in there. / kilt, great. Blouse, shirt, and shoes. I think we should strike with a collar. I mean, have you been to Forever 21? Like there are some really pretty shirts, you know, great shirts that don't have collars. So I don't see that. What the point of that is. I'm not sure why we have tank tops, shorts, and bathing suits as not being allowed. I would assume that is, I don't know why that language is in there. But even still, if you think about current fashion, there are some really high-end tank tops, shorts that people wear. So I don't know why that wouldn't be allowed if it's under somebody's gown. But anyway, no bare feet. Agreed. Not safe. That's a safety issue, right? So then, right, we're back to the C and D. So that's, I think, where you have to, you know, hopefully by the next meeting, just maybe have 1 or 2 selections. I really feel that elevating the federal law is probably our closest, the closest we can get. And I don't know that law, but everything that all that you were saying, Adonis, all that you were saying, Thon, all that you were just telling, I imagine it should be encompassed under that right to protection. And I hope it is. Maybe Katie can send us a link to it or something if she has it handy. And then E. So Gina, the superintendent definitely, as Dan mentioned earlier, they will not want to be determining in advance who can wear what. That John was very clear about that this morning. And now I understand why he was talking about that. It must have come up. We could try to push here. Maybe the school committee won't accept it, but where it says that students without proper attire will be turned away, their diplomas will be removed, and those will be, et cetera, et cetera. What if we said students, and we used some language, John would have to help us, that says not without proper attire, but rather, right, students that, you know, are wearing offensive, you know, if we used a word that caught those symbols that, as Jess mentioned, that's what we're trying. We don't want to not give what we need to avoid what we don't want. Maybe we could put it in there, since apparently we're already willing to turn people away. That might be a place for enforcement, but I would suggest that probably would get amended out, but you could always put it forward. Okay, so I just wanted to give you some workable structure to try to get some of this moved forward in writing.
Jess, I see your hand.
I was just going to say, for maybe not this iteration, but in the future, it may be worth discussing in a broader audience about having green and white gowns so that all gowns are both colors. Again, just thinking about people who are non-binary, even if you give them a choice, they might be like, well, I don't really love either. So if all the gowns are green and white, then you get the school colors and everyone's wearing the same thing and no one has to make an awkward decision.
So help me out. We were trying to complete this document so that it can be presented to the school committee at the next meeting, correct? When is that next meeting?
I think that's Tuesday.
Okay.
Looking at Lisa, is that correct? I think that is.
So would the committee be able to meet before then?
So what I was just about to recommend, I don't know if I quite have it worked out my mind as a motion yet, but my thoughts would be, because I think speaking with Gina, we need to have this, it needs, you know, we would need to vote to approve a version of this, and either tomorrow or Thursday is the deadline for it to be posted and submitted for it to be on that. I believe it's already an agenda item, but this needs to be posted so people have this beforehand. So I believe that the like deadline is either tomorrow or Thursday. So we'd have to check on that. But my thought in apologies to to our practices work group, but would we be able to create, make a motion to add the, you know, the kind of impact statement that to the point that Lisa and Etta made, and to put verbiage around highlighting the federal laws as we just discussed, and make that final. So we would basically vote today to have the, you know, to adopt this with those changes, and that we would, you know, finish that as a working group tomorrow for the school to send forward. Thinking out loud there, but just thinking of, you know, we do have, you know, students graduating, and, you know, this really, if this is going to happen, it has to happen on Tuesday. Otherwise, you know, just so thinking there.
So I don't think we can, because that would kind of just be a, like, I think we would have to see it before we all voted to approve it to go to the school committee.
Not legally, Maya.
Oh, we don't? Okay.
No, so when doing policy work, this can be considered a first read. You can certainly bring it back for final approval, but because you're actually a subcommittee of the school committee, and any adoption is really all you're voting for is to what you're sending to the school committee. The school committee is the one, right, that once they have to have their vote is what puts it into policy. So you can make a motion to accept the dress code policy as amended, approve that, and then designate someone to update the language. Because all it's really going to happen then is it's going back to work. It's just going back to work with a bigger group, right? So, I mean, this is not it. This is the work here, but then the school committee, I can think of, you know, they're going to say, okay, someone's going to say, well, why don't we say culturally inclusive? And you're going to be like, we were there and we got here. I mean, you get 12 people. So like pack a lunch. Okay. We're going to be there. It's going to be okay. But so this is just a working document. It's not a final policy until the school committee adopts it. So yes, you can say, if you trust one another, you trust the subcommittee, approved with amendments, it goes to school committee, gets coded, because you could always then disagree with it there. You could say, oh, wait, that's not what I thought. I want something different. Or between now and then I read something and I want something brand new. You all can do that, right? So we just do that at the next meeting. So move forward. You've done so much work.
Oh, that's excellent. Dan, that sounds like a go.
We're richer.
That makes a lot of sense. But we do still, we need somebody to make that. Oh, Thon, you have your hand raised?
I just raised my hand because it looked like Nicole Weeks had a question.
Oh,
so
I'm
I raised my
sorry.
hand for you.
I didn't see you, Nicole.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
I was just looking at the student handbook dress code, and there's some language in there right now. I know, Lisa, you said, you know, wearing attire that's not offensive, but maybe if you just wanted to pull some of that language is already in there that has already been approved. To add to that, it says attire that promotes suggestive, profane messages, alcohol, drugs, or violence, which lead to the disruption of normal school activities, is also prohibited.
There it is. There's your D.
So if you want to, because then they approved that language. So it's like, oh, you already said yes to it.
Well done.
Great.
Thank you, Nicole.
I will link, Lisa, I'll just link, send you the link to the student handbook.
Actually, if you could send that to Maya and Dan, they have them sorted out. The task force. But you can copy me.
So then we need to do that motion, Dan?
So, oh boy. I would propose I would make a motion for us to approve this recommended dress code graduation ceremony policy with the amendments we discussed, and period.
Second it.
And it's been seconded. All of those in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? That is unanimous.
I'm glad we were recording. I'm realizing I'm not writing this down. I will go
That
back
was,
and watch that.
Oh, I was going to say it was a motion by you and seconded by Thon.
And unanimous. Perfect.
And that moves us to our next agenda item with the discussion and approval of the terms and definitions prior also to the school committee review.
Yeah, so I have those up here. Thank you, all the task force members who put a lot of thought in here. There's a couple, I highlighted some suggestions at the top. Superintendent Picard made the suggestion last time for us to consider prioritizing a short list of words that we use the most or are most important. To my understanding, and anybody who knows more, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that is a mandatory, but I think it was a suggestion. And then some task force members made the suggestion that we should consider providing examples for some and or all of the definitions below. So we could think of those. I wanted to make sure we didn't forget those. Another suggestion was to alphabetize this. So I did do that. So this appears in a different order. We then took the suggestions from task force members. This coding is terrible. I apologize. The yellow is something that was added. So this here, we had anti-racist as a definition. We did not have anti-racism as a definition. So this is taken from the racial equity tools. So this definition here was added. Anti-racism is defined as the work of actively opposing racism by advocating for changes in political, economic, and social life. Anti-racism tends to be an individualized approach and set up in opposition to individual racist behaviors and impact. So that's taken from that tool. And all of these are linked out to specifically, where they come from. There was a suggestion for us to remove ARTF. That was an acronym for Chariho Anti-Racism Task Force, because using that acronym doesn't, really the power is in the words of Anti-Racism Task Force. There's no real significance of ARTF. There were some minor like grammar or just like slight wording changes, nothing. So I didn't highlight those, but anything that was content changed, I did tweak. We did have a suggestion. This is the same definition. There was one line that was removed that had that just wasn't quite clear or as intentional. So this is same citation and same, definition. There was just one kind of unneeded sentence towards the end there. Justice was added. So we defined diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there wasn't a justice. And that is right in our charge to look at diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. So we added that here. This also, Native people and Indigenous people, there was, again, same citation, same definition, but there was one kind of unneeded sentence toward the end that kind of made things a little kind of confusing. So making a little more concise and intentional and took that out. That was the only changes. So slight wording tweak here. Added the definition of justice, slight wording tweak to here, removing this acronym, and then adding this term. Otherwise, exactly as was posted in the meeting and sent out to members. So I will mute and listen for feedback.
Thank you very much, Dan. This looks great. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns on our An hour. I apologize. My brain is tired.
Glossary list.
Glossary. Thank you. Katie.
Yes, I wonder if at the end it might be helpful to have full references for any of the sources from which we've pulled. Essentially a references page. Might be a place for further reading.
That would actually be a pretty easy switch, rather than, linking it right here. It would just be, a little one and it would add it as an end note. So that organizationally may be helpful.
And then one other question. This is all alphabetized currently?
Now it is. It was not when it was sent out. I apologize. But yes, now it is. The only things that I suppose wouldn't be is there's a few, like racism is here under R, and then it's individual, the three, types here we defined separately. But other than that, yes, it is all alphabetized now.
Beautiful. Thank you to everyone who put.
So Dan, with all of these, with the changes and with it now having the prioritized list, which the superintendent recommended, this is ready for Tuesday's meeting? That's what we're voting on right now.
Yeah, so that's what we would definitely need to make a motion to move this forward as a recommendation for the school committee. So right now we just have, it's not numbered, but the 4 pages or 3.5 pages of terms. Superintendent Picard's suggestion was to make if you don't approve all of them, these are like the most important ones kind of list. So like a shorter list in the beginning. I don't think that is a requirement, but if I know, some of the pushback at last meeting when the suggestion was made, that was, it's kind of hard to say, really many of these will be considered in, maybe some of the recommendations moving forward or are used already in these meetings. So that would be the only thing, is if we want to take the time to add examples as needed, or if we want to make a shorter prioritized list and then the additional list. So that's the only potential, but otherwise I do think this could be we could make a motion and approve this as is.
I see Katie and then Lisa.
My apologies. I realize the space that I'm taking up. But in thinking through the potential conversation, I've seen before in legal texts, there are occasionally like everything has its own line. So you can refer to like definition 1 or line 26. I don't know if something like that might facilitate discussion at school committee meeting, which it might take us unnecessary time to find ourselves in the right place. I'm assuming there are page numbers, but I have to admit I forget. Are page numbers included, and might the definitions be numbered, or might there be line numbers added to each line for ease of discussion?
That's a good point. That, certainly we could, change that formatting pretty quick. My only concern, like when in policy I've worked on, is when you add numbers, usually that sometimes people assume there's like a hierarchical nature rather than this is, alphabetized. So I think just listing it as 1, 2, 3, maybe that may be an issue, but adding line numbers, my only concern there is on, certainly can do that. I don't know how to do that in Word, but I know how to do that outside of Word. Wherever this will live, I'm guessing on like the website. I'm not sure format wise what that'll look like. but those are just my only thoughts. But I think that's a good point of, I think at least now that it's alphabetized, that will be helpful. But yeah, that there's a lot here. So maybe challenging to navigate it all.
I'm also happy to suggest this to be work that I do versus suggesting someone else do work. I could try to make an attempt if anyone else other than myself thinks it would be useful. I've just dealt with large documents like this, and sometimes finding your way to certain areas takes more time than the actual discussion point. Thank you.
Lisa, I see your hand raised. You're still muted.
You know, the good thing about that is you always get like a second take. Like, do they really want to say it like that? So the task here was to create a glossary list. You did that. We could always be striving for perfection. Send it on. Send it on. If the school committee says, you know, one or two people say, I can't read this, take it back and number it, then take it back and number it. I mean, if Katie, you want to do that work, I mean, I wouldn't stop you, but you've done what you've been asked to do. You've done it incredibly well. I do not think that a short list can be created. I could not choose 5 words. I could not choose 6 terms. I could not choose 10 terms. These are the terms. This is not going to print. What's the issue? There's no money issue. We're not printing this. We're not destroying materials. It's going to go on the web. Let web design determine how to lay it out. Share the work. Your work was to come up with the glossary, right? Definitions of shared language that this district wants to use when we describe anti-racism in our space. You did that. Let everybody else do their jobs. Web design can do web. ITS can decide how it has to be laid out. Now, putting this maybe, Dan, in like a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet, just so that there's some lines, yeah, that would be easy to read, right? But you are also amazing. Sometimes I feel like I seem to say, like, you did your work. It's done. Send it. Get some feedback. Take a break. It's fantastic. And as a school committee member, if you bring 5 terms, I'm going to argue that they all need to be included. I can't get on board with selecting a shorter list, and I really don't see a reason to do it.
I would agree with that.
I agree with that also. Yeah. Especially like, I know she said like the terms that you use most often. And when you look through this list, we use almost every single one of these terms, every single conversation.
Right. If that's the measure, Maya, there are some people who never use these terms because they don't.
Oh, absolutely.
So what? So it just, when this comes to school committee, I'm going to argue for the list. And some may get argued by school committee anyway, based on their definition. So there's going to be arguments to be had, good ones, thoughtful ones, I'm sure. So I recommend that your task force approves it as is, and add a Google or Excel sheet for readability.
Here is where one of you are going to make the motion.
I will make a motion for the Chariho Anti-Racism Task Force to approve this recommended glossary of terms with the changes we just went over, and send that to the school committee in hopes for them to adopt it.
I second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Which it was already unanimous. And no abstention, so that was unanimous.
Beautiful. So I'm happy to just change, like readability wise, just format wise, and send that over to Donna and Gina to move that forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody who helped with this, put that list together. and offered their feedback, and thank you very much. Public comment. Our next agenda item is public comment on future agenda item.
Is it public comment or future agenda items?
It's actually all of it. It says public comment on agenda items.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading too. That I think that's.
So the public can only comment on agenda.
The agenda items that we've already gone over.
That I believe was actually.
You as school committee.
That was actually, I believe that's happened now. Gina mentioned last time that was supposed to be changed.
That was, yeah, the same one.
During on agenda items, anybody can provide comment. This is for anything that was not on the agenda. It's so I think that's a typo.
It's supposed to be for
we accidentally did that last time too.
Okay, so let's adhere to it as it is.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have members of the public this evening besides Nicole. I don't see anybody else that might want to speak on something else, so that's fine. We'll adhere to it. But since clerking was an item tonight, as a member of the public, I would like to thank Jess for coming on, for all that you have done, for how you contributed to Charahoe's first ever anti-racism task force. And when we said, right, why now? Who's going to do the work now? Who's going to step up? You stepped up. We will always be grateful. You'll always be part of this inaugural group. Thank you for all that you've done. We will miss you, but we're all very grateful for all that you've done for this team. And we wish you the very, very, very best.
Thanks so much. It's been an honor and a privilege, truly. I admire all of you so much, and it's really been fantastic, and thanks for having me.
Good luck to you and your family, Jess. Thank you so much. So our next meeting date, I believe we have already scheduled.
June 2nd.
June 2nd, right. And
said that more confidently than I am. Yes, June 2nd.
Yeah, you had us all convinced. And do we have any possible future agenda items?
The only thing I think would be for us to discuss feedback and action taken by the school committee between now and when we meet next. Hopefully both of these will have been heard by the school committee.
Definitely, good, yep.
And then one other item would be to hear an update from where, as we're approaching the end of the school year, an update from each of the committees on kind of where we all stand in thought, and kind of next steps would be helpful.
Don't forget, you've also tabled appointment of the clerk.
Right. So we're gonna have the appointment of the clerk also on there.
Yeah, and I suggest that you and Dan and Gina meet to discuss the composition of the task force, and if you're just going to leave it as it is, or add a seat.
Oh, okay.
And please include me.
Are there, Katie, is your hand up?
Only because it seemed as though Thon wanted to add something, but we've, oh, he said his laptop just died. Maybe I can, is that permissible for me to see what he might have suggested to add, or we can just do it offline? Could be a suggestion as well.
I would say less than all of that. And if there's just something you want to add it.
I did not have anything to suggest.
Okay. Okay, so Thon could always reach out to the chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Were there any other suggestions for the future agenda items?
I just let Thon back in. He was in the waiting room.
Oh, okay. Thon, if you can reach your audio, we're ready for your suggestion.
I apologize. My laptop just died. I was looking for a charger and it just died. So I just came in on my phone. You are looking for a suggestion for a new secretary? Is that no?
No, future agenda items for the next meeting on June 2nd.
If you had any.
If you have any, yeah.
Nothing is coming in present to my mind presently. Oh, I do. I don't know, maybe this is something that should be, I don't know if it's just something that should be talked about in practices, or it's kind of just I will bring it, I don't know how to word it. I suppose it should be kind of just taking a look at things that are appropriate when teaching units on Indigenous cultures. Maybe. Does that fit here, or should that be in practices?
Not saying it doesn't fit here. It's kind of why we're all here. But I think that the actual discussion and what you're probably to help you narrow that into what you actually want to say, it would go in with your subcommittee.
I would just maybe like to highlight some thoughts I had around maybe things we could do to help with appropriateness of classroom practices when dealing with Indigenous teaching about Indigenous cultures.
Mm-hmm. That definitely sounds like a discussion within. Oh, Nicole has her hand raised. I would say that sounds like a discussion within your subcommittee meeting.
You could put it on the agenda as that, Maya. It's your decision as chair, but you can definitely, if Thon wanted to talk about classroom practices specifically with the whole group, it would be through your agenda, because otherwise he can't get everyone's input because he would start rolling quorum.
Right. Is that what you mean, Thon?
I think I probably, in a small group, I'm sure this will come up as a discussion, but I think I would like the opportunity to kind of hear from everybody, or at least like some suggestions of how we can navigate moving forward.
All right. That sounds like it is agenda item. Nicole?
I wanted to ask the task force if maybe they can help give suggestions to Diversity Book Club, as we're gonna host Indigenous author Miss Smith, who wrote Hearts Unbroken in October. We want to kind of extend this, like what Thon was saying, use this as a platform to continue the conversation and bring in our community's heritage, the Indigenous community, heritage and start that conversation going. So we purposely set it for the fall, giving people opportunity to read her book and maybe think of some other opportunities for collaboration.
So that would be collaboration with the Diversity Book Club. And
Yeah.
I think use that, then there should be enough space and latitude to have a conversation in a couple of different directions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Nicole.
And just as a point of order, Chair, as so you know, you don't always have to include everything in the next agenda. As Chair, you have the decision making to decide how you want to parse that out. So at any time, if you feel like your agenda is getting long, it's under your authority to say, okay, these items for this date, these items for a future date, and so on and so forth.
Okay, because otherwise that would be this is going to be a long one.
Pack a lunch. Just kidding.
That's my joke.
Where, are there any other suggestions? Okay. With that being said, that was the last agenda item, other than the motion to adjourn.
I make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Well, that was all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
That looks. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? That would be a unanimous decision to adjourn at 8:46 p.m.
Good night, everybody. I'll
Good
see
night.
you at the meeting on the 25th.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.